Hey Kid Detectives, this is Miss Garvin. So today we're going to read the second part of the Canary Caper. So if you have not listened to the first lesson for the Canary Caper, chapter 1 and 2, please stop this video, go back to assignments and watch that first lesson. That way you know exactly what is going on. Also, I will not be doing any videos of me in this lesson. I want to do this nice and quickly and just with audio. Alright, so before we get started, really quickly grab yourself a notebook or a piece of paper, and that way you can write down those elements of mysteries that we will be working on. As I'm reading, go ahead and write down any thoughts or clues that pop up, maybe some of those elements like the detective or maybe a victim, maybe even a suspect. Really quick, just to remind you of the elements of mystery. You may be looking at who the detectives are, the victim or victims, the suspects or suspect, witnesses, alibi, red herring, evidence, crime, and the clues. Today we will be reading Chapter 3, 4, and 5 of the series A to Z mysteries called The Canary Caper. Chapter 3. The kids left the pet shop and headed up Main Street. They walked slowly, thinking about what to do. "I've read about scientists stealing animals to use in experiments," Josh said. "That's awful," Dink said. "I don't want Tiger used in some experiment," said Ruth Rose. "We have to find those animals. Where do the Gwens and Pardews live?" "The Gwens live over by us, on Thistle Court," Dink said. "Why don't we go talk to them?" Ruth Rose said. "Maybe the pet napper left some clues." The kids cut through the high school grounds and past the circus trailers. A few of the workers were sitting at a picnic table, drinking coffee. They waved when the kids walked by. "Which house is the Gwen's?" Ruth Rose asked when they reached Thistle Court. "That big gray one," Josh said. "The mailbox in front says Gwen in black letters." Ruth Rose walked up the steps and rang the doorbell. Miss Gwen opened the door. "Hi, kids. How's your summer so far?" she asked. "Not so great," Ruth Rose said. "Someone stole my cat yesterday." "Oh, Ruth Rose, how awful. My parrot disappeared yesterday, too." "So did Miss Davis's canary," Josh added. "We came from the police station," Dink put in. "Officer Fallon told us about your parrot. Dr. Pardew's rabbit is also missing." Miss Gwen's mouth fell open. "My goodness! You mean that 4 pets disappeared yesterday?" "We think so," Ruth said. "Where was your parrot when you last saw him?" "On my back porch, in his cage," Miss Gwen said. "Can we see the cage?" Dink asked. Miss Gwen took them through the kitchen to a screened-in back porch. A cage stood in one corner. "Archie likes it out here," said Miss Gwen. "He can watch the other birds in the trees. Yesterday I came out to have my lunch, but he was gone." Dink checked the screen door that led to the backyard. "Was this locked?" he asked. "I don't really remember. We often leave it unlocked," Miss Gwen said. "Could Archie have opened his cage door himself?" Josh asked. Miss Gwen shook her head. "We always keep a clothespin on his door to make sure he can't open it." "So someone must have stolen him," Ruth Rose said. "Oh dear, I don't like to think of crime in Green Lawn," Miss Gwen said with a sigh. "Can I offer you kids something to drink? It's pretty warm." "No thanks," Ruth Rose said. "But do you mind if we look in your phone book for Dr. Pardew's address?" "They're at number 3 Pheasant Lane," Miss Gwen said. "I dropped Mike off there to play tennis with Andy Pardew." The kids thanked Miss Gwen and hurried to Main Street. "This is getting weirder and weirder," Dink said. A canary and a parrot were snatched right out of their cages in broad daylight, with people home. And Tiger was probably in the backyard when she was taken, Ruth Rose said. They waved at Mr. Paskey at the book nook and headed up Aviary Way. 3 Pheasant Lane was a big green house surrounded by tall trees. A kid holding a tennis racket was sitting on the front porch. "Hi," Ruth Rose said, walking up to the porch. "Is Dr. Pardue home? We'd like to talk to him about his rabbit." "I'm Andy Pardue," the kid said. "Violet's my rabbit. Why? Did you find her?" "No, but my cat is missing too," Ruth Rose said. "And so are 2 other pets in town." Dink glanced around the Pardue's front yard. "When did your rabbit disappear?" he asked Andy. "After lunch yesterday," he said. "My sister ran into the house screaming. I went out to the cage, and the door was wide open. Violet was gone." "Can you show us the cage?" Ruth Rose asked. Andy led them to the backyard. An empty rabbit hutch stood under a tree. "Was the cage locked?" Josh asked. "Yup. I lock it every night myself." Andy Pardue gave them a sharp look. "What's going on, anyway? A ring of animal thieves?" "That's what we're trying to find out," Dink said. "Well, let me know what you dig up," said Andy. "Boy, I'd like to get my hands on the creep who did this. My sister cried all night." The kids walked back to Woody Street. "Let's stop and check in with Miss Davis," Dink suggested as they passed her house. "We should tell her about the other missing animals." When Miss Davis opened the door, she had a big smile on her face. "Oh, I'm so glad to see you 3, she exclaimed. "You'll never guess. A man just called. He said he found Mozart. He's bringing him here at 6:30. Isn't that lovely?" "That's great." Dink looked at Josh and Ruth in surprise. "I want you 3 to be here since you were kind enough to look for him," Miss Davis continued. "Afterward, we'll have some of my strawberry shortcake to celebrate." "Super," Josh said. "We'll see you at 6:30, Dink said with a wave. The 3 started home. Josh grinned. "I guess Mozart wasn't kidnapped after all." "I guess not," Dink said. He looked at Ruth Rose. She wasn't smiling. "There's one thing I don't understand," she finally said. "How did he know who to call? How did that man know who Mozart belonged to?" Dink shrugged. "Maybe he found him near Miss Davis's house and asked one of her neighbors." "Or," Ruth Rose said, "maybe the guy who called is the same guy who took Mozart." "But that doesn't make any sense," Dink said. "Why would someone steal a canary on Thursday and return it the next day?" "For the reward," Ruth Rose said with a frown. "This guy steals pets, then returns them for money." Dink and Josh just stared at Ruth Rose. They walked the rest of the way home in silence. Chapter 4. Dink and Ruth Rose sat on Dink's front porch. They'd just finished dinner and were waiting for Josh. Ruth Rose sighed. "Tiger hasn't come home yet?" Dink asked. She shook her head. "Cats can be pretty mysterious sometimes," Dink said. He wanted Ruth Rose to feel better. Maybe she's visiting a cat buddy somewhere. Ruth Rose looked down. She's never stayed away like this. Suddenly, Dink noticed that Ruth Rose had forgotten her headband. Her curly hair was hanging in her eyes. Just then, Josh came running down Woody Street, carrying his sketch pad. He jogged across Dink's lawn. "Did Tiger come back yet?" he asked. "No," Ruth Rose said, standing up. "Come on, let's go see who brings Mozart back." A few minutes later, they were ringing Miss Davis's door. Ruth Rose had a determined look in her eye. "If this guy has cat scratches on his hands, I'm calling Officer Fallon." Miss Davis opened her door, dressed for the occasion. The green gem in her necklace sparkled in the evening sunlight. "I hope you've brought your appetite," she said. "To help us celebrate Mozart's return, I've made some shortcake." Josh grinned. "I might be able to eat a small helping." Miss Davis laughed. "Oh, pooh, Joshua Pinto. I've seen what you can do to a batch of my cookies." They walked into the living room, Mozart's empty cage set on the piano. "It will be so good to hear Mozart sing again," Miss Davis said. The doorbell chimed. "He's here." Miss Davis hurried to the door. A thin young man stood smiling on the front porch. He was dressed neatly in a white shirt, dark pants, and blue suspenders. The man held a small box with holes poked in the side. "I'm Fred Little," he said. "Here's your canary." Dink looked at the man's hands as he passed the box to Miss Davis. Not a single claw mark. He shot a look at Ruth Rose. "Thank you, Mr. Little," said Miss Davis. "Won't you step inside?" Miss Davis introduced him to Dink, Josh, and Ruth Rose. Then she opened the box and lifted out her canary. "Well, Mozart, how was your vacation?" She gave the canary a quick kiss and placed him in his cage. Everyone paused to watch Mozart hop around, then settle down to preen his feathers. "Mr. Little, I can't tell you how grateful I am," Miss Davis said. "But how did you know where to bring him?" Ruth Rose kicked Dink in the ankle. Fred Little smiled. "I had to do some detective work," he said. "I called the pet shop today and asked who in town owned a canary. A nice woman told me your name, so I looked it up in the phone book." "That must have been Miss Wong," Dink said. "We talked to her today, too, about Ruth Rose's missing cat. When did you call her?" The man stared at Dink. "I don't remember exactly," he said. "It was right after I caught the canary." Miss Davis clapped her hands. "How thoughtful of you to go to so much trouble. Will you accept a reward?" Ruth Rose glanced at Dink with a smirk on her face. The man smiled at Miss Davis. "You're very kind," he said, "but no thanks. It's reward enough seeing your little bird back home again." Dink snuck a quick look at Ruth Rose. She looked confused, and Dink could understand why. If he won't take a reward, then he didn't steal Mozart. And if Mozart didn't get kidnapped, maybe Tiger didn't either, Dink thought. "Then at least have a cup of tea and a cookie," Miss Davis asked. "That'll be fine," he said. "May I use your bathroom?" "Down the hall and on the right," Miss Davis said. "Kids, Will you help me in the kitchen?" While Miss Davis boiled water and arranged her silver tea service, the kids put cookies on a tray. "He didn't take the reward," Ruth Rose whispered, frowning. "I can't believe I was wrong." "I don't know, Ruth Rose," Dink said. "There's something fishy about this guy. Why didn't Miss Wong tell us he called her?" "We saw Miss Wong in the morning," Josh reminded them. "Fred Little must have called her later." "Yeah, I suppose," Dink said. "But I have this weird feeling I've seen Fred Little somewhere before," Josh said. "Around here?" Ruth Rose asked. Josh shrugged. "I'm not sure. I can't remember." "What are you three whispering about?" Miss Davis called. "I'll need some helping hands in a minute." When they were all seated around the card table, Miss Davis poured 5 cups of tea. "Are you just passing through, Mr. Little? I haven't seen you in town before." "I'm here looking for a job," Fred Little said. "So you might settle in Greenlawn? Wouldn't that be wonderful?" Fred Little smiled. "It's a nice town." He glanced around the living room. "You sure have a lovely home, Miss Davis." "Why, thank you. When my husband was alive, we traveled a great deal," Miss Davis said. "We brought back something special from each country we visited." Fred Little left a few minutes later, and the kids helped Miss Davis clean up. "Still have room for shortcake?" she asked, grinning at Josh. "Sure do," he answered, picking up his sketch pad. Josh began to draw a picture of Fred Little's face. "I just wish I could remember where I've seen this guy before." Chapter 5. That night a thunderstorm sent the kids running from their tents into their houses. It was still raining the next day, so they decided to play Monopoly at Dink's house. "Ruth Rose, it's your turn," Josh said. "I know," she said, staring out Dink's window. "I can't concentrate. Tiger is out there in the rain." Dink and Josh just looked at each other. "If Fred Little didn't take the pets, then who could it be?" Ruth Rose asked. She came and plopped herself down at the Monopoly board. Dink thought a moment. "If we could figure out why someone was stealing animals," he said, "maybe we could figure out who was doing it." Ruth Rose picked up her stack of Monopoly cash. "I still think it's for money," she said. "When people get kidnapped, it's usually for ransom money, right?" The boys nodded. "But no one who's lost a pet has gotten a ransom note," Josh said. "Not yet, anyway." Ruth Rose tossed her play money onto the table. "I'm going home. Mom put an ad in the paper, and I want to be there if anyone calls about Tiger." The 2 boys watched her put on her coat and head out into the rain. "I've never seen her act so mopey," Josh said after the door closed. "She doesn't even argue with me anymore." "Yeah, and have you noticed she's not wearing one color either?" Dink pointed out. "I hope Tiger comes home soon." That night the rain cleared up, so Dink and Josh slept out in the tent again. The next morning Ruth Rose woke them up. She was wearing cut-off jeans and an old t-shirt. Her untied sneaker laces were muddy from dragging. "Read this, guys," she said, and she shoved the Sunday Morning Gazette under Dink's nose. One paragraph was circled in red crayon. Dink and Josh stumbled out of the tent and sat at the picnic table. The paragraph was under local area crimes. Dink scanned it quickly, then read it aloud. 2 Green Lawn homes were burglarized last night. Officer Charles Fallon has reported. The homes of Dr. and Mrs. Michael Pardue and Mr. and Mrs. Harvey Gwen were entered by persons unknown. Several items of value were taken. Police are investigating. Dink looked up. Wow! First they lose their pets, then someone breaks into their houses. I think that stinks. And I think they're connected, Ruth Rose said. Don't you see? It is about the money. Someone is taking pets, then breaking into the same houses. But why would someone need to steal a pet before robbing a house? Dink asked. And not only that, Josh added, but what about you and Miss Davis? Your pets disappeared, but your houses weren't broken into. He's right, Ruth Rose, Dink said. Why just 2 houses and not all 4? Ruth Rose frowned at Dink and Josh. I don't know, she said. We should try to find out. Let's go to see the Pardues and the Gwens again. Maybe the burglar left some clues. They hurried over to Thistle Court and rang the bell. Mr. Gwen came to the door in his bathrobe. Oh, hi, kids. Miss Gwen told me you stopped by Friday. Guess what? Yesterday afternoon, someone found our parrot and returned him. Ruth Rose stared at Mr. Gwen. Archie was returned yesterday? Mr. Gwen nodded. To celebrate, I took the family out for dinner and a movie. But when we got back, we discovered we'd been robbed. The rat took my coin collection. I'm sorry to hear that, Dink said. May I ask who returned your parrot? A nice young woman, Mr. Gwen told the kids. She said she caught Archie eating seeds under her bird feeder. Did you invite her into your house? Ruth Rose asked. Before he could answer, Dink blurted out, Did she see your coin collection? Mr. Gwen's mouth dropped open. Are you suggesting? Oh, my! You could be right, he said. The collection was in the living room where we sat and talked. You think she came back and stole it? Dink, Josh, and Ruth Rose looked at one another. Ruth Rose had her I told you so look on her face. It sure seems that way, Mr. Gwen, Dink said. The kids thanked Mr. Gwen, then raced all the way to the Pardue's house. Out of breath, Ruth Rose rang the bell. Miss Pardue came to the door. Hi, gang. What's up? She said. Ruth Rose asked, By any chance, did someone bring your rabbit back yesterday, before your house got robbed? Why, how did you know? Miss Pardue asked. A nice young couple called and said they'd found Violet in their garden. They brought her home yesterday afternoon. Dink explained how the Gwen's parrot had also been returned before they were robbed. Miss Pardue's eyes got wide. Of course! That couple came in and had a cold drink with us. Dr. Pardue offered them a reward, but they refused it. What did they steal? Josh asked. Several pieces of my good jewelry, Miss Pardue said. Some of it was left to me by my grandmother. Ruth Rose thought a minute. Did they ask to use your bathroom? Yes, the woman did, Miss Pardue answered. She could have snooped in my bedroom at the same time. I feel so foolish. The kids said goodbye and headed for Main Street. I knew it, Ruth Rose said. The pet nappers and the robbers are the same people. Boy, what a dirty scam, Josh said. You steal someone's pet, return it to get a guided tour of the place. Then come back later to take what you like." "Talk about a double whammy," Dink said, shaking his head. "I think it's going to be a triple whammy," Ruth Rose said. "What about Miss Davis?" "What about her?" Josh asked. "She hasn't— oh, my gosh." "That's right," Ruth Rose said. "I'll bet anything that Miss Davis's house is next." All right, detectives, this is the end of Chapter 5. We've now read Chapter 1 through 5. So if you could go back to Teams and answer some questions about the elements of mystery. I hope you enjoyed this reading and you will get some more tomorrow.